Okay, so we're going to do a map review, basically covering our topics while looking at the maps because it is a test about maps. In the back of your textbook, there is an appendix, map, scale, and projection, and it's very helpful to go through because it gives you all that concept, and then I typed up what the readers had put out. All right, but you get back there and you can see the difference between the different types of maps. Remember we told you the map of my childhood was a Mercator that navigators used, and the lines are straight up and down, but it really distorted things. This is a Robinson projection. And then the one with the cutouts, this is the goods. How do you say that, Sam? Hummel
sign.
Hummel-Sign. Okay, is that what you got?
Homolocene.
Okay, Homolocene, all right. Sam decided to dress professionally for this today. You'll get to see it. So there's some real helpful stuff back here. And then what I get a kick out of is the room line versus the Great Circle. If you're ever on a plane, like when I'm flying back east, I'm like, why are we flying over Canada? All right, if I crash and die, I want to crash in America. All right, USA. But they're just going in a straight line. They're following the curvature of the earth. If you were to go around the outside the room line from San Francisco to New York, it's actually longer. So they'll take a Great Circle route. So look at that back there. That's helpful. And then it just gets into the different thing about GIS and GPS. It's just helpful to look over real quick. So make sure you do that. Okay, so the test is about space, about spatial analysis. It's about region, and it's about diffusion and flow. So what they'll do is they'll say global perspective, and then they'll say, then they focus down to regional perspective, like in Oceania. Then they'll get down to what they call a state, what we call a country, Australia. Then they'll get down to a province, and then they'll get down to a city, and then a city block. So spatially, they're going from large down to small. But if it were to come up about scale, remember this is small scale because the number is huge, like 1 over a million, and the detail is small. Large scale would be a larger number, like 1 over 10, and you get a city map like Lodi. You guys chime in whenever. Is my math good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think large amount of detail. Small amount of detail.
Yeah. All right, but then you flip that over. Remember, we're talking about if they're talking spatially, regionally, then the globe in our minds is big, okay?
It's the opposite.
But yeah, if we're talking math, it's the opposite. So just, really read what the question is. I think that's where kids get screwed up. All right, as we talked about, they're going to talk about diffusion and flow, where hearths are and where things flow to. Like, we know a lot about Europe going through stage 2 of demographic transition in the 17, 18, 1900s, and all those Europeans flowing over to Anglo-America that the Anglos settled, Latin America that the Latins settled, the Spanish and the Portuguese. They also went down to Australia, South Africa. They're going to want to see diffusion patterns, all right, and why, why they left, okay? So talking about the world
jump
map.
in real quick on scale. So our different types of maps. Remember this one was the azimuthal map, and Mr. Wright likes to call it the Santa Claus map. So when they start talking about core and periphery, remember this is your core countries are going to be your developed countries, your more developed countries, and your periphery, your less developed countries. And like, Mr. Wright says, Santa Claus has lots of presents here, but once he starts to get the periphery, he starts to run out of presents, right?
The outside.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
No health care for you.
Think of the apple. This is the core of the apple. This is the periphery or the outside of the apple. Not to be confused with when we're looking at a city map about the center and then the periphery or the hinterland. Okay. Sam, you want to jump in on anything on the world map? Anything you can think of? Okay, he's shaking his head no. Okay. All right.
Population-wise, remember most of your population is in this area here. Okay, these guys, they're young, they're growing, they're just not there yet, right? And then where your shrinking populations are, okay, because we're getting old, and if we didn't allow immigrants in, okay. And then also remember where your level 1, 2 4 countries are going to be. So
Explain that.
demographic transition model, right? So we talked about level 1 countries. You know, they like Mongolia, you know, or actually not Mongolia, Nepal is what they like. Okay, just not very much in terms of not very developed. Okay, level 2 countries are, you know, going to be places like Niger, Chad. They're starting to get some industry, but mostly they're still an agricultural economy. You know, level 3 countries, we think of China as almost level. It's like 3, maybe going towards 4. Okay, I'm actually talking about Rostow's model right now, but the two, remember, are kind of interchangeable. That demographic transition model and Rostow's can kind of sit on top of each other. So, so with China, level 3 countries, you know, you've got a lot of industry. They're still building, but they're not to that place where they're, you know, like here in the United States, where it's mostly a services economy. You know, in China, there's still a lot of industry in the economy.
Okay. All right.
To
So
add.
chloroplasts, what they'll do is they'll shade whatever the topic is. So if they're talking about religions of the world, you know, they would shade Islam a certain color, all right, through here. You might see a little bit in India, even though there's 150, 200 million Muslims there. Million, yeah, I said million. Christianity would be Europe, and then Anglo-America and Latin America, we'd see it down in Oceania, and then you'd see spots, you know, where Christianity is spread. Buddhism, we'd see the big color shade here in East Asia. Hinduism, we'd see a color shade here. And then Judaism, if they went there, you'd see, you know, a little bit here in Israel and then over in the United States. If they did a chloropleth, you know, for language, you know, then we would see the different languages, which we've talked about. And, you know, Arabic would, you know, similar path. We'd see Arabic big in where the Muslims are here in Central Asia. But remember, Indonesia is unique in that they are Muslim, but they never adopted the language and some of the other cultures. And there we're talking about hearth and diffusion. The closer you are to the hearth, the more wedded you are to the strict customs, the strict rituals, and the farther away you are, there's distance decay, you know, it tends to fade. Just probably would be, you know, oh, like, I don't know. I don't want to make a religious comparison with Christians because we're actually more into church than the Europeans are now, so that doesn't work. So chloropleths, okay. All right, they might do a chloropleth for democracies, you know, where you see in the United States and Canada, Europe, but then you get to other, you know, there would be less down here, all right? And then you might see some agricultural, where we talked yesterday about wheat regions, corn regions, rice regions, you know, wheat where it's drier in the interiors, rice more on the edge where there's a lot of water, wheat in the interior, okay? So different chloropleths.
I was just thinking politically, you know, your autocracies and your anocracies, you know, kind of know where those things are, okay, in your democracies.
North Korea is the big, you know, autocracy, all right? And then you know, you see some different countries in Africa. Oh, the one, okay, well, when we get to Asia, I want to talk a lot about Myanmar. So when we get there, okay? Can we go to US map?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, all righty.
We were at 9 minutes.
All right. Okay, Sam, this is where you get to jump in. Now on physical geography, you know, we know about warm, moist air coming up through here, and these states are really green. You don't find sprinklers in homes. Their sprinkler is on an end of a hose, all right? Now what's interesting is there's like a magic line, I think it's the 95th line of longitude, where east of that line is green and you're growing corn. You've got, you know, crops that can grow without a lot of irrigation, if any. And then west of that line, then you start seeing irrigation that goes to wheat here. And you see, and then we get to the farther west you go towards the mountains, there's less and less agriculture. This actually we call high desert because the moisture comes down this way, the mountains block it, not a lot gets in. All right, our moisture comes from the Pacific Ocean. Usually our wet storms come down, and hopefully there's cold air bringing in enough drop in temperature where we can have snow. All right. Anything physically you want to add?
I mean, do they have to know about topography or?
Oh, go ahead. Talk about topography for a minute. Jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, just generally, I guess understanding how like the country is set up, where it's just like mostly just mountains in the west that are like much taller than in the east, and then it just kind of goes flat in the plains region, the center of the country, and then it kind of builds back up to not as high of a mountain range, and then it starts to fall back down towards more flat regions as you get to.
Explain to them why our mountains are bigger than the ones in the east.
It kind of has to do with age, but also with kind of tectonic formation. So the Appalachians in the east are a lot older than the Rockies in the west. So there's just been more weathering of that range. And also there just isn't a major, like plate interaction there, or at least not as much as in the west. And I don't know, I feel like from what I understand, the Rockies are still building up. So it's kind of just increasing in size. Whereas in the east, it's just older and kind of just more, it's actually, the Appalachians were actually in a continent before North America, before we formed. So yeah, it's just been more weathered.
They're old and weathered.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, population density. You know, the country was settled here. You're gonna see a much bigger population density there. You see it in urban areas where there were ports and industry and economic growth, like in Chicago. West Coast, you know, we've obviously got the ports. We've got a lot going on here. And then as you travel in the interior, you just see less people who smoke more and eat more. It's shocking, all right? I've never seen people eat and smoke at the same time at a restaurant. You see it in places. Canada is gonna have most of its population down here because obviously temperature, the farther north you go, the colder it gets, all right? You know, Mexico we see as Mexico City, 22 million people, it's the center of everything. It is a primary or primate city. We have a rank size rule where New York is the largest at 8 million plus. Then you've got Chicago and LA at 4 million plus, and it just kind of works its way down all the way to Lodi. All right, so population, anything?
Religion, remember Baptists mostly down here, more Protestants up here, and that has to do with
the Catholics.
And Catholics, right, in Baston, okay? And then we talked about over here, we're like, oh, so many Catholics, and we don't tend to think of it as Catholic, but there's a lot of Hispanic people and they practice Catholicism. Yeah, remember this is also America, okay? So this is South America, right, Central, and then North America. Mr. Wright talked about the population clusters, that's important to know. Let's see.
Before you forgot the.
Yeah, we're not leaving religion yet.
Don't forget religion yet. This is going to be where the Lutherans are because Northern Europeans settled here, Germans, Swedes, and then you've got the Mormon migration. This is big Mormon country out here.
And they might say LDS now is what I've learned. And then languages, they might maybe give you like a dialectic question, something like that. That would be going pretty far down. I tend to think it'll be more political.
Yeah.
Maybe the question would be. And so remember, population clusters that were pointed out already tend to be vote blue. They tend to be Democratic. You have like lots of different ethnicities represented, lots of people who tend to vote Democratic. So we talked about different types of maps. Those red and blue states, if you get something like that, just remember where those population clusters are, and that more people usually means Democratic.
Okay.
Or yeah, they're voting blue.
We're out of time on this.
Okay.
Okay.